Hi Liz, it's Zach,
Liza.
and we are filming for you today because we were thinking about next week's lesson plan and the lesson snapshot too. We know we aren't going to be there because we are going to be at the professional year interviews, and so we were going to be there in spirit, but we're not going to be there in
Physically.
person. So we thought that the best way to at least come up with like some way to do like the reflection like we did last week and everything was if we recorded ourselves doing it to each other, and then we will do the same kind of reflection like we did last week. So we have our lesson plans here. Full disclosure, just like last time, we don't have like every single piece of content ready for our lessons, like the papers and all that stuff. But we have the snapshot turned in and everything, so we're just going off of that like we did last time. So Liza's gonna go first, and we will talk to you after.
Okay, so my plan was based on second grade. It is social studies standard history. For this lesson, we are planning to analyze methods and patterns of change over time within across nations and cultures. My question is, how can students identify these historical sources and utilize the tools of historian? How to choose primary and secondary resources and when to use them? So that's an essential question for my students to at least understand when to use the primary and secondary resources. Once they already know the concept and the difference between both of them, they will be able to identify resources that are going to be provided to them, such books, magazines, articles, or newspapers. My language objective for this is going to be speaking, reading, explaining, arguing, and as well as sentence level in words. Students will be able to identify history as the story from the past, preserving various resources. Students also will be able to identify historical resources and how to utilize the tools as an historian. Students will be able to identify how people in the past influenced the history of neighborhoods and communities. This will give the students some sort of knowledge on what type of resources to use when it comes to community research or um, articles. Encourage students, home language that one of my students will be using is encourage students to participate in the discussions where they can be able to discuss their native and EL students will be able to explain and discuss any points on their native language if it's preferred. Students will be also discuss how primary and secondary resources will help students to reinforce their uh, their thoughts and add visual supports. For example, I'm gonna add, I don't have it with me, but I was thinking in to make posters with primary resources, what resources will fit in primary resources and what resources will fit into secondary resources. For EL learners, I was also gonna provide like words in Spanish, like vocabulary words where students can easily identify the meaning for the resources as well. Practices for this week readings is like how can two people understand the same event differently from either primary resources or secondary. And then also why it's important to use more than one resource for information. How can putting events in order by the time helps to describe the past? Excuse me. What kinds of tools and resources do historical thinkers use to investigate the past? And a special activity, like I said, it was gonna be the poster. I was gonna do cutouts with magazines, newspapers, articles, and the students were gonna match the resources, like either if it was a primary resource or a secondary resource, and how they were gonna use that for future references. And then I'll look like a brief description for my lesson planning. It was that students will have the opportunity to discuss about reliable resources and how it is essential to search for communication information and communication information. Sorry. Um, After discussing, students will also have the opportunity to research in the internet what are the reliable resources that they can count with. The class will get in groups of 3 or 4 students, and they will also represent to the whole class. They will present. They will be presenting as reporters and also as historians, like what type of resources reporters will need, or what type of resources historians will need. Um, so after the discussions, EL will also discuss the discussions, either English or Spanish, whatever that makes them feel comfortable. Um, Assessment, I will obviously observe each group and assess their reasoning and descriptive language. I will also observe the discussion and listening to them carefully. EL as well will have the opportunity to describe and participate in their native language if preferred.
Awesome. And then for some quick feedback on that, um, I guess my only question would be like, um, what types of th- things are you going to do? I guess it might be in the assessment section, but if you're doing things to help like with the bilingual learners, what kinds of supports are you going to have like we've woven throughout, and like how are you going to see that they're making sure they're doing okay in the assessment section?
I will record their progress. Like at the beginning of the week, it's like a week study kind of. The students will be able to describe their thoughts at the beginning of the week, and then at the end of the week, they will be able to present what they have learned.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. Good work.
Thank you.
Yes. And then mine is I did my for first grade again. My social studies standard is History 1, develop an understanding of how people view, construct, and interpret history. My essential question is why is it important to know the order of events? So my domain is in reading, genre, explain, and language sentence level. So students will be able to read about a sequence of events and then properly sort them on a physical timeline using primary sources and then creating their own secondary source in the form of a timeline. And then that was also in the standards arrange life events in chronological order, which is DOK 1. Um, for the home language justice focus, I want my students to talk about life and talk about their events that have happened in their life in order that they came in and also in a way that's free and comfortable to them so they don't have to feel like they're holding anything back. Um, Targeted practice from our readings and from lectures. I want to do the kind of timeline that we did last class period where we all lined up and we made ourselves in a timeline. I think that that's a really neat idea. So in my lesson plan, I have a written out thing that I created. It was a timeline, and I was going to make up a fake persona, maybe named Bob or something. And I was going to list out the different life events for him. Um, and on that timeline, I have the day I was born, my first steps, I learned how to ride a bike, my first vacation, my first job, I finished high school, I got married, first pet, started college, and finished college. Now, I didn't put those in order for a reason. I want the students to be able to, one, sort them in the order that is chronological, and two, some of them don't have to necessarily be in any order. And I did that on purpose because I wanted kids to see, kind of like it was in ours from last time, that the students have different lives and things can be different, and that's okay. Um, and then I want the students to then assemble themselves in a timeline based off of the events. Some will be created in order to be placed wherever, like I said, and then we'll talk about why that might be. And then talk to students why it is important to have things in order. One of the questions I had is why didn't the person get married when he was a baby? Obviously, the student would say he's too young, stuff like that. Just so they're understanding the concept of time in chronological order, and like as you grow up you can do other things. Then I want the students to create their own timeline from birth to first grade where they're at, um, things that have been important to them, only like 5 things, like if they wanted to put um, first trip to Disney or whatever they want to put all the way up until first grade. And then briefly at the end, gather them all back together and talk to them why it is important to know the order of events in history. Um, and bring that back into why that's important for them and then why it would be important for other historical events. Because we want them to make sure that they're understanding that World War II was not 10 years ago, it was way longer than that. So
Mhm.
we are just making sure that like they're understanding the concept of time in the sense that things come before and after. For my assessment, I will know how the students did by assessing their own timelines and seeing what they count as important and how and where they're placing their events and how they are putting them in their orders, that kind of stuff, how they're explaining it. That way I'll know if a student is putting, obviously I hope this doesn't happen, but if a student is putting, they had a dog before they were born, that wouldn't make sense and I would have to help them scaffold to get to the point where they understand that their life starts here and then events can happen before obviously, but we want to make sure that their life timeline is within their lifetime or whatever, so then they can understand that chronologically things can happen whenever. So that's kind of my rough draft of my timeline. And I think, do you have anything else to add or?
Yes, I just want to say that I really like your idea
Thank
about
you.
the timeline for their own lives. It's really like somehow you're relating like their personal experiences to what engage in the class, the content. Just one question: how will you incorporate this lesson plan into like EL learners?
So if I were to do this for bilingual learners, what I would do is I would make sure that I give them the exact same content. If I'd have to translate it for them, I will. I will make sure that they are understanding that they were making a timeline, and it's going to be the same thing. I want them to be able to put their life events in order. If they feel more comfortable doing it in their language, that's totally fine with me.
Okay.
If they feel more comfortable presenting it in their language, that's fine with me. I just want them to be able to be grasping um, that that knowledge and concept of chronological order of
Mhm.
events. Um, and if I have to get somebody to help me translate or whatever, that's fine too. Those are things that I can definitely like look forward ahead, like I can look ahead to and plan for. But like at a very like face level type thing, I would make sure that they're getting what they need and they're not lost. So um, the assignment just be in a different language, that kind of stuff. All those kind of skills and tools that they can use to make sure that they're getting the lesson just as the people that are monolingual English
Okay.
speakers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's it. If you need something else from us, please let us know. Um, yeah, we will take anything. So
Hmm. Have a good night. Thank you.
thank you.